Today I'm going to share with you my Claude Code plus linear system that is saving me hours every single day and helping me ship faster. This is a graph of my GitHub contributions over the last year, and you can clearly see that in the last couple of months over here on the right, I have been shipping a lot more. Now, some of this activity is for projects that I use to teach on this channel, and some is even for open source tools that I've shared with you all. But the majority of these contributions are actually for a product that I have in production for which I've been fixing more bugs, adding new features, and implementing customer requests. I want to be clear that shipping faster isn't the real end goal here. In my case, it's that I have to walk Claude Code through the same process over and over to implement a new feature or bug fix. And that takes me hours every single day. So what actually matters to me is freeing up more of my time by not having to babysit Claude Code through this whole process and instead using that time to work on creating more content on YouTube, for example. Let me walk you through my workflow, which is helping me do just that. Now, I like using Linear for product management, and I generally prefer to have AI meet me where I'm at rather than trying to invent a new process or workflow in order to use AI. I think this greatly reduces the friction to get started, as well as the time it takes to see results. So this is what my typical process looks like for resolving a linear issue. Typically, it's going to start with planning with Claude Code, where we're going to have some back and forth, fleshing out the idea. And once everything is well defined and we've covered, for example, all of the architecture decisions, the design decisions, any edge cases, then I'll go ahead and accept the plan and let Claude implement it. Once Claude Code is done with the implementation, then I'll tell Claude to go ahead, commit, push, and then open a PR on GitHub. Once the PR is open, I'll use a / command for executing a PR review. And typically I'll do that by opening a new Claude Code to save the context window for my main agent, or I'll just tell the main agent to spin up a sub agent to execute the / command and run the PR review. Once the review is complete, I'll again spin up either a new Claude Code session or tell Claude to use a subagent to address all of the issues that were brought up in the PR review. And then once everything is fixed, I'll tell Claude to commit, push, and add a comment to the PR summarizing all of the issues that were addressed. On GitHub, that is again going to trigger another review. This time it is a re-review, just to validate that all of the fixes were implemented correctly and that no new issues arose. But if there are more issues that are brought up in this re-review process, then we're just going to come back to this step where, again, we're going to spin up another subagent to fix all of the remaining issues and then go through the commit and push process. But if everything looks good in that re-review and everything was addressed, then the PR is basically ready for merging and release into production. And I'll tell Claude to go ahead and update the linear issue just to add a comment on any findings or learnings that are important for posterity. So things that we want to record that we'll be able to reference later on. So this is the process for resolving a linear issue completely. And ideally, I want Claude Code to be able to resolve linear issues following this entire process end to end without requiring me at any of these steps. And the thing is, besides this planning step up here, everything else in this process is executed in the exact same way and order every single time. So it's perfect for automation. But the one thing I never recommend outsourcing to AI is the plan step, which is often going to require you making certain strategic or creative decisions. Decisions that likely have a direct impact on the customer experience for my app and the problem I'm solving for my customers. And I think this is really the key to leveraging AI as a multiplier for your output without losing the actual value that you create. No one knows your business, your domain, your product vision, your problem better than you, including any AI, right? No matter how much context you give AI, it will never have as much context as what's in your brain. So what it's good for is researching, automating a process, compressing information, and giving you different perspectives. And those are the things that I would focus on outsourcing to AI. Very quickly, before we dive in, all of the prompts that I share here will be available in my new Substack newsletter called The AI Launchpad. Every Tuesday, I'll be sharing practical AI tips and techniques for automating repetitive work so that you can focus on solving higher leverage problems. It is now and will always be free. So if you're interested, you can sign up at theailaunchpad.substack.com. The link will be in the description as well. In Linear, the basic unit of work is an issue. It defines a problem to solve, and that can be, for example, a bug or a new feature. So here in my Linear project, you can see examples of issues at different stages. They typically get added to the backlog first, and then we'll move through these different statuses as they get worked on. So if we click into one of these as an example, you'll have your title and then the description of the issue. And typically you want your issues to be narrow in scope. The way I like to think about it now in the context of AI is that it's narrow enough of a task that it can be accomplished within a single context window. This issue, for example, has a brief summary of what the issue is, the current versus the expected behavior, acceptance criteria, the scope for the issue, and some root cause analysis. So to create linear issues, I use slash commands, which follow a specified template depending on the issue type. All I have to do is explain my initial problem, and it'll walk me through a quick process to refine the issue until it's well-defined with little to no ambiguity. That's important for an agent to be able to solve it end to end without requiring additional input from me. So let's take a look at this example for creating a general linear issue. At the top, we have a goal, which is to create an issue that an AI coding agent can pick up and implement without needing to ask clarifying questions. So all of that has to be done upfront when we're in the planning phase. So you can see we have some principles that should always be followed, and then a standard workflow, which has 4 steps, which is understanding what the user wants, what exactly is the problem, drafting the issue, reviewing it with the user to sign off, and then creating it in Linear. In addition to the workflow, we then have a standard template that we want to use for every issue. This is just generally for any type of issue. But then we have some issue-specific sections that we add, for example, if it's a bug. For bugs, we want to add steps to reproduce and a root cause analysis. And then we have some examples of what makes good and bad titles, acceptance criteria, scope boundaries, etc., and an example of how to create the issue using the MCP tool. So besides creating issues from scratch with my slash command, if they are created from another source like Sentry, then I have some other slash commands to enhance those issues and just make sure that they all follow that same principle where they're well defined and there's no ambiguity, so an agent can just start working on it. After issues, the next level of work organization in Linear are projects. Projects are useful for grouping multiple related issues. So let's say you want to implement payments into your app. You'd have to create a Stripe account, a database table to store your subscription data for each customer, add a pricing page, and set up Stripe integration into your front end like a checkout page. In that example, your project would be setting up payments, and all of the tasks that we just described would be your individual issues. So here in my linear workspace, you can see other examples of projects that I've implemented. Here's an example of a project where I wanted to implement an image library feature in the app. So you can see we have a high-level goal. There is another level of organization within projects where you can group issues within a project into smaller groups called milestones, and that just gives you another level of organization. But milestones aren't a fundamental concept like issues and projects, so I'm not going to get too much into them. Let's walk through the slash command that I use to create these projects, and similarly, you can get the full command on Substack. So here's the slash command for creating projects. Again, we have some overarching principles that we want to always be followed, including how to keep projects tightly defined and then breaking them out into multiple projects if there are too many acceptance criteria or the scope is just too big. For projects, we have a 6-step workflow where we're going to use that existing slash command to create the individual linear issues. And then similarly, we have a general template that we like to use with our projects and an example at the bottom of how to create the project using the MCP tool. Now, what's really nice about this system is that in linear, you can actually define what issues are blocked by other issues. So going back to the payments example, you need to create the database table first before you make changes in the app to check the subscription data. And so the front end issue would be blocked by the database migration that you need to run first. So this is natively supported in linear. It's really nice because Claude can take advantage of that when planning these more complex projects with many steps. Now, coming back to the workflow, the first step for Claude is to understand this initiative. What is the actual problem that we're solving? What is the end state? And we're telling it to clarify any ambiguities with the user. So I'll typically spend, like I said, 5 to 10 minutes planning out a project with Claude, getting it dialed in, and allow it to ask questions to determine any ambiguities or edge cases, etc. Now, almost inevitably, details will slip through the cracks sometimes, and that's okay because you can always create a follow-up issue to fix those changes. So coming back to this example in linear where we have our image library project, up here I can click on issues, and you see for this project we had 6 issues across these 3 different milestones. Once we have our project completely set up and all of the issues really well defined, the next step is to create a repeatable process or workflow to essentially automate everything after this planning step. So all of these steps where Claude can just resolve the issue end to end. This is where the real time savings comes in. So this is the slash command that I use to actually resolve each issue. There's a couple of important parts I want to highlight. One is that we're going to use subagents throughout this, and that's going to keep the context window for our main Claude code from filling up. So typically when I use this slash command, Claude Code will go to work for 10 to 30 minutes at a time, and the context window won't fill up at all because we're going to use subagents throughout this. So the first step is going to be to get the issue details using MCP. It's then going to generate a new branch following this convention of using the linear issue in the name. And this is going to automatically link it. So whenever we open a PR, it'll automatically move through those statuses from being in the backlog to in progress or in review. And then we're going to have it call a new plan agent. And this plan agent is going to create a plan using test-driven development. And that means it's going to take care of first writing all of the tests required for these changes to make sure that nothing breaks. So we have an example of how it should do that. Then after that, we're going to call another general agent to implement the plan, which is of course going to involve calling a lot of tools. Then we're going to commit and push the changes, update the linear issue with any relevant information or findings, start a background task to monitor the PR checks, and then if any checks fail, call a new general agent to fix the failures, commit the changes, and push, and then add a comment to the PR summarizing the changes. As a final step, the main Claude must read the complete PR review, and if there are any issues or recommendations, it has to call another general agent to, again, address all of those issues, even minor ones, and then finally clean up all of the background tasks once everything is complete. This is just following the process that we saw in the diagram. So I wanted to show you a demo of running the / command to resolve an issue end to end. And I have this existing issue in my backlog where in my app, which is a messaging app for sales agents, we don't have status tracking for the different message delivery statuses. So we don't know if a message was sent, if it was delivered successfully, etc. in the app itself. So this is my app. You can see in these message bubbles that we don't have read receipts. And so this issue is to add those delivery status indicators to the different messages. So this would be a huge improvement to the sales agents that are using my app. And so I'm going to head over to Claude Code and run this / command, and I'm just going to give it the issue ID, which should be 69. And we'll go ahead and kick that off. And what we should see right away is all of the tasks being added to the to-do list. This is probably going to be running for a while. I'll just let it go, and then we'll see once it gets closer to opening the PR and going through the review checks. We'll check back in and see how long that takes. So it's been about 16 minutes, and it looks like Claude already opened the PR, and now it's just waiting for all of the checks on the PR to run. So those are happening through GitHub Actions. Here is the PR that Claude opened. We can see all of the checks running here, including the Claude code review. Oh, looks like it just posted. We can see that some issues were raised. So here are some critical issues. There's a race condition among some other issues. So this is where it's really important to run a good review process on these changes, because a lot of issues and errors will get caught before releasing to production. Now, we're already using a test-driven development approach to implementing the fixes, so there should be good test coverage, but still sometimes things are missed. So it's good to have a second agent looking at the changes. So if we go back to Claude Code now, it should see that there were some issues raised in the PR in a sec, and then it should call that additional agent to fix all of those issues. So we'll go ahead and wait for this to wrap up. Okay, so Claude just wrapped up the rest of the process. You can see it worked for 26 minutes total, and it used about 73,000 tokens, which is not bad. There's still plenty of context window left, and again, that's because we were leveraging those sub-agents. So pretty context efficient in terms of preserving the main context window. It looks like all of the checks eventually passed, so it did address the issues that were raised in the PR review. There were 5 of them, so quite a bit, but they were all addressed. And then let's go and check out the fix here on GitHub. So that was the original review, and then we see this commit where it made the changes to address the issues that were raised, and then it adds this summary comment of all the things it fixed. And then we get our follow-up review, which is going to then check and make sure that this was actually all done, which it looks like it was. Finally, we get our approve verdict. So this is now ready to be approved. So once the rest of these checks pass, then we should be good to roll this out into production. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this pull request. And I'll go ahead and release this into production so we can see the updated changes. All right, so I'm back on the app and I just refreshed the page and you can see that we have red receipts. So the fix was implemented, it's out in production, and we can roll on to the next issue. So with this simple two-step process where I plan and create a project with issues, I spend 5 to 10 minutes planning the project, and then for each issue, I spend less than a minute, as you saw, to run the / command, and then at the end, review the PR and merge it. So I went from having to interact with Claude Code every few minutes, as you saw in the diagram, to giving one / command and then coming back to a ready to ship PR after 20 or 30 minutes. The next step to improve this and remove myself from these final manual steps is to make it where I don't have to run the / command myself, since obviously that's a repetitive task and I really don't need to be doing that. So that way I could simply review the full project once it's implemented, review those final PRs once all of the changes for all of the issues have been implemented. And that's when you start getting into the realm of Ralph loops and Moltbot, where they can just run continuously, but that'll have to wait for the next video. That is going to do it for today's video. I hope you found the video useful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. You can sign up for my newsletter on Substack, where I'll be sharing more weekly insights to help you unlock yourself with AI. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.